So yesterday at the time of recording, I made a tier list of all the MK characters that have had sex. Crazy, right? And I put it on Twitter and somehow it got almost 1,000 likes overnight. Some people were really like, you get the people who were acting above it all, like, oh, this is dumb. It's like, well, yeah, that's the point, idiot. You're the dumb one. And there's some people who are just wrong about it. I just wanted to quickly go over this. I've updated it compared to the Twitter version. So here's what I'm pretty sure is the definitive version, because a few people made a few observations about things that were incorrect in the original version. And so just to briefly explain, well, briefly for me, all the characters and how we know that they have indeed done the deed. I mean, at one point, Shao Kahn I had him in Implied, I think. Someone was like, hey, what about him and Sindel? I'm like, yeah, well, prove they actually had sex. They don't actually state to have had sex anywhere. And then someone's like, yeah, prove all the characters in has had sex. And it's like, my dude, most of them have kids. Yeah, so we know that Sindel and Jared have had sex because Katana exists. Scorpion had a son, Satoshi. Johnny and Sonya had a daughter, Cassie. Jax had a daughter, Jackie. Kenji had a son, Takeda. These are all just very obvious. Baraka was one I left off originally because I forgot that he did have a child. He had a daughter. I think it was a daughter. He definitely had a child. I forget if it's specified as a daughter, but he did have a kid in the current timeline, but that kid died. So he's had sex for sure. Melina, I originally had her in Implied because in her case, it was only suggested in some intros and it wasn't really definitive. But looking back on it, I feel like it is kind of evident that she at least had sex with Reiko. I had Reiko in there as well. And the fact that those two, in the comic, they're in bed together and he's topless, she's draped around him. While it's not definitively stated, I do think that it's conclusive enough to look at it and say, yeah, they definitely had sex. Reptile, I left him off as well because the eternal virgin of the old games, but I forgot he had a kid in the current timeline who also died. He and Baraka are unfortunate. Like, they finally get to have families and their families die. I mean, to be fair, Reptile's having a son is not mentioned as much. It's more just broadly family. Like, the specifics are not as apparent as it is with, say, Baraka or with Scorpion when they bring it up. Then with the great Kung Lao, obviously, Kung Lao existing indicates that he did have sex at some point. Argus and Delia, Argus has 3 sons, 2 with Delia. What I want to use for this was like MK characters, and it has a bunch of NPCs as well, which is good because it allows for broader use of characters. Rain's mother is not on here, and neither is Jade's mother. But, obviously if they would be on here as well. Gorbak has a son, Goro, and in Journey Begins he had a second son, Dorak. I think they might have actually referenced Dorak in like a mirror match intro for MKX or something, but canonically he doesn't seem to exist. Kotal Ket's the father of Kotal Khan, and then the Lin Kuei Grandmaster, who is the father of Sector, according to MK9. So yeah, these characters are all parents. At one point I actually had a category for, the reason it's pink here is because at this point this was going to be for characters who have procreated, but I didn't want to have too many tiers. I didn't want to divide it up too much. Then we have characters who have had sex according to intro dialogues. Liu Kang and Kitana. That's one of those where I was like, I'm pretty sure they've not been confirmed to have sex, but there is a mirror match intro with Kitana in MKX. It's played as a joke, where one says, avoid Liu Kang for the future. The other one says, he's just a friend. And then in a very casual manner, she says, you totally had sex with him, didn't you? Like, completely out of character for Kitana. But it's a mirror match. It's a joke. It's fine. But there are other intros, like there's one between Liu Kang and Baraka, where Baraka refers to Liu Kang as Kitana's consort. And so, obviously in the NetherRealm timeline itself, the Revenants may have done, but the human versions definitely didn't have sex. But it's still implied here that they did have sex at some point. I'm not sure why we've still got Khan down here. I know the evidence is only in intros, but he mentions having concubines. That seems like a weird thing to lie about, or to be like a weird, potentially canon, but probably not canon thing. So yeah, we'll say that he has definitely had sex with his concubines. Whether or not he ever had sex with Sindel, we don't know. Someone said that there is a reference to him and Sindel having sex somewhere in MK11. I don't remember that line. I feel like I would remember if it happened. But then people also said Dairu had a family, and I can't find any evidence of that in any of his bios or endings. So who knows? Maybe people just smoking some weird crap. And then we have Eren, Natara, and Scarlet, because in an intro with Scarlet, Eren says, I stepped out with Natara before you, which is obviously suggesting that he has had sex with both of them. So there you go. And then we have Implied to have had sex. This was one someone suggested, which is Goro, because in MK4, in his ending, he says to Kung Lao, if I had lost to your ancestor, maybe it would be my own son coming for revenge. And the thing about that is, we don't know, there's never been explained anywhere if Goro does have a son. I always interpreted it as him just talking in like a hypothetical, but then you have to consider, well, how does this hypothetical make sense if he doesn't have a son? But then it's like, well, why would Prince Goro having his son never come up anywhere else? So I feel like it could be interpreted either way. And he does have 7 wives. He's probably had sex. I mean, just having wives isn't enough evidence that someone has had sex, but I feel like there's enough, though. You could easily interpret it as Goro has had sex and has at least 1 child. It's something I'd like to see them actually expand upon. Tanya, who I don't think it was ever explicitly stated that Tanya had actually had sex with Melina. I mean, even though they have a kid together in Melina's non-canon MK11 ending, they're both women. So unless this was like some like fate lore bullshit, I don't think that confirms they had sex. You know, that's probably just a creation of the flesh pits. Then there's Jade and Kotal. They probably did. But again, there's nothing definitive. And with Kotal and Devora, you know, did you tell Jade about us? There's nothing to tell Devora. Such deception, Kotal. Obviously, that suggests something sexual, but it could have been like a romantic thing rather than sexual. Again, it's one of those where it's open enough that you can read it as an implication, but it's not firm enough to say they definitely did. And then we have Kronika. And again, at some point, there was like, Kronika, when and how? And I'm like, she has kids! But because she's a Titan, that's not definitive enough proof to say she's definitely had sex. She may have done. We have no idea the circumstances of the creation of Cetrion and Shinnok. We don't know if she gave birth to them or just formed them. We have no idea. Then we have characters who probably had sex. This was more about characters who, from their lifestyles, like just like a normal person, like a Cobra or a Kira or a Striker, they probably have, you know? They're not like monks or lifelong assassins. People who just like grew up in America, what have you, they make sense. Bo' Rai Cho's been around long enough, and he's the kind of guy who goes around drinking. He's not just like your standard like chaste kung fu master, so he probably has. Fujin, that's one some people disputed. I feel like because he went and lived among humans, it seemed like the kind of thing that could have happened. It's one of the less serious choices. Like, I could go either way on Fujin. It's just, I feel like he has enough riz that he could have pulled it off if he tried. Rain is another one that probably has. Dramin, that's one people didn't really point out much. But you have to remember, Dramin, according to his original bio, was like a king, and then he died and descended into the Netherrealm. He's not a creation of the Netherrealm. He's like Scorpion. He went there after he died. But the fact that he was some kind of king, it's like, he probably did have sex. He probably had like at least a concubine he had sex with at least once. Then you have Shang Tsung, who's got the Riz, and Quan Chi. That one's a bit more dark. I was tempted to put Quan Chi in never had sex because, you know, maidenless behaviour. But you have to consider the fact that, especially in the current timeline, he has all these people who are subservient to him. And the Brotherhood of Shadow is now the Sisterhood of Shadow, which means all the members are female. And they serve Quan Chi. Either he formed that organisation of female demons, or he just came in and just like took over it, which is wild to imagine. But he has the mind control stuff, so maybe that's the reason. But it's one of those where you look at it and go, he's probably had sex with someone serving under him. It would just make sense if it happened at some point. But again, nothing definitive. Then, of course, we have Cassie, Jackie, Takeda, and Jin. Now, Jin's a monk, but he did live in America for most of his life because he was rejected by the Shaolin. Those 4 really seem like they probably did have sex. And, you know, Takeda and Jackie, if I was going to like rank how likely a character is to have had sex in this category, they'd be really high because they had their relationship. There are MK11 intros that claim the two are going to get married. It would make sense if they'd had sex before now. Darius has Riz. Onaga, he was the ruler of Outworld for a while. Again, that kind of status suggests that they probably did at some point. Motaro is a stallion. He's probably done it. And then Mocap is just like a normal dude. He probably has. There's one other piece of MK media that features Mocap. And, you know, he did get a girl's number. He has some riz. He does have some. So it could have happened. And then this is one that people quite enjoyed seeing. If you see this part and still think this whole thing is entirely 100% serious, there's something wrong with you. Has technically had sex. Yes, Ermac technically has because Jared is a part of him. So technically he has done it. Come on. And here's a new section that wasn't in the original. Characters who have had sex, but in non-canon material. So if a character is stated to have had sex somewhere, but it's not in the main stories for the games, like if it's in an adaptation or something, yeah. Kano, MKX ending, says he has a son. We know nothing else about this character. Presumably he was supposed to set up like a new generation Black Dragon that maybe would have involved Cobra and Kira, but, you know, MK11 just ignored everything MKX was setting up. Chameleon, there's a card for Reptile, one of the support cards in MK Mobile, Broodmate Chameleon. And so, according to that game, the two have had sex. The game has no story, so we have no idea where that goes. And unfortunately, Chameleon being a cameo character is not going to get her own ending in the new game. So, we'll have to wait a while to see if that actually goes anywhere. But for now, yeah, she's not Reptile's mate in the current timeline. But according to MK Mobile somewhere, the two did have sex at some point. Then we have Serena and Cabal because of Cabal's atrocious MK11 ending. And then we have Apep. I actually had him at the end of probably has not had sex originally because it's Apep. It's Apep. No one would expect him to grow up and have sex. But then we have the main character of the Crypt mode. Oh, wait. Yeah, because the character there is the descendant of Apep, which is just a nod to Apep. But I forgot, and while the Crypt is non-canon, you can tell because of like Kano's status there. The character is canon. Aftermath. So yes, Apep canonically had sex. Jesus. Now we have probably not had sex. Kung Lao, probably not. You know, he's a monk. Even though he's a bit of a renegade, he's probably not had sex. Then we have Nightwolf. You know, the whole shaman, protector of these people's lands. Originally, he was just like a historian. That was part of his story. That's not really a thing anymore. Now he's just kind of the traditional shaman character. Probably not. Some people try to debate the Sub-Zero not having had sex. One person even said Sub-Zero has a family, so he's clearly had sex. And I'm like, what family? His brother? Like, Biology 101, you don't have sex to produce your own siblings. You can do that. That is a possibility. But most people don't do that. And I'm inclined to assume that Sub-Zero did not do that, since his brother already existed. When they were taken from they're both children, they were taken from the parents. What are you on about? You are insane! Then we have Sector, Cyrax, Smoke, again, lifelong assassins with the Lin Kuei. They've probably not done it. You know, some people just like, oh, look at Cyrax though, like, he's clearly, it's like, no guys, you can't just look at a character and go, look, this person is sexy, so they must have had sex. That's not how it works, you fool. Idiot. Taven and Dagon, there's nothing definitive to say about them. It's generally best to assume that the god characters probably haven't had sex, unless there's like Fujin Riz. And Taven and Dagon were locked away for so long, like 10,000 years. And we don't know how old they were at the time, but like clearly they can't age. Dagon is aged. It just seems unlikely to me, you know? Then we have Movado. He seems quite devout to the whole Red Dragon thing. Seems unlikely. Li Mei, there's just nothing definitive about her. Ashra, she's too busy with her whole purification thing. No time for sex. Maybe in the future, who knows. And some people were like, oh, she's clearly dating Reptile in the intros. And again, dating is not enough to say that some people have had sex. It's just not. And that can even make for an interesting character bit. The idea that, you know, Reptile's, he already had a child before who died. The idea of him having like trauma over that. He doesn't want to risk having another kid. He can't go through that again. That'd be a cool direction to take the character in the next game. Although, I get this suspicion that Ashra's is not going to come back. Reptile probably will, but Ashra's probably just going to be dropped in favour of a different character. It's just a vibe I get. Moloch is just an Oni. Maybe, maybe not. He has so little character, it's really hard to tell. Dairu, again, some people said Dairu had a family. I can't find evidence of this. I don't know where these people are getting this information. Hotaru, probably not. Seems too devoted to order. Havoc, too devoted to chaos. Jarek, Suhao, no Riz. With Kintaro, there's not much we can really say because he has so little character, but he is part of like a minority race that's looked down upon, so it's easy to imagine that. A lot of other Shokan would stay away from him. Super extreme racism, because while Shiva thinks her race, the Shokan, is super hardcore and cool, they're actually not. They're all terrible people. Tremor, Big Rockman, probably not. Collector, no Riz. Ferrator, please God, I hope not. Frost and Shiva, they're both kind of the same reason. They're both just frigid bitches. Like, it's not, no one would go for them. Make Shiva like a reasonable person. Do the thing for Frost. You make them reasonable people, and they might have a shot. And the rest is just like random NPCs, like Monster. Forest Fox was too young for that. No Face is all burnt, probably not. You know, Kia and Jataka, devoted to serving the Brotherhood. We know so little about Tasia. Okay, she's like a normal person. She's not like a rock monster, so realistically, she probably has had sex at some point. Boatman, devoted guy for Onaga, dragons, and Wule. Oh wait, you can't see him. Wule. Yeah, Wule of the Tengu clan from Arctica. Yeah, he's probably not. He lives in Arctica. He's probably not done it. And then we have the characters that I feel like I can look at and say, with certainty, they have not done it. So with most of the gods, Raiden, Shinnok, Cetrion, the elemental gods, Geras technically counts, Blaze, you know, these two are tools of the gods. Why would they have sex with anyone? The one being, with whom, I ask? Zombie Liu Kang is a separate character. Obviously not had sex. Why would he? He's a fucking zombie. Shujinko, we saw like 40 straight years of his life from when he was 13 up until he was an old man. I can say with certainty he never had sex. It's like the one character to look at here and it's not based on their status as like some kind of artificial being like Meat and these guys, or who is a god, and say we've seen enough of his life to say he's never had sex. And then we have Chameleon, presumably Saurian, we don't know for sure, but he presumably is a Saurian. and there's nothing to suggest he ever had sex with female chameleon, so he probably just didn't. And the rest are all just like NPCs and alternate forms of characters. I think that is pretty accurate. There might be one or two that I got wrong or where there's like room for interpretation. I tried to be generous with some of this stuff and be like, these characters are implied, or there's specifically intro dialogue that states it is, but that intro dialogue is debatably canon. There's not enough to really definitively say. Look in the description, there might be something that I missed out. Look out for that. But I think this is pretty accurate for what I'm going for here. So yeah, those are the NK characters that have had sex. Be sure to check out my old Cannonball episode on canonical relationships of MK characters, the romances. You know, I could have made this as a fully edited video like that one, and I did briefly consider it, but I don't want to put too much work into a video that may well get demonetized based on its concept. So yeah, no, just take this and move on, you know?